Hi everyone, hope you're doing amazing. Today we're doing really well, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Carolina Fonseca Jimenez. I focus on doing children's books that promote love, unity, and peace, and we also interpret dreams here because we understand that when we interpret our dreams, we are connecting with ourselves on a very profound level. We also share them because we are able to connect with others when we're sharing our dreams as well. So okay, this week you guys, we've gotten a lot of dreams in, but most of them have been about nightmares. So you know that whenever you have a nightmare, you wake up and a lot of the time what happens, you're scared, you're sweating, you're freaking out because you just had this dream, and a lot of the time it feels very intense and it feels like you're actually there. So okay, we're going to get into what it means when you have a nightmare, why we have nightmares, and what we can do with the information that they provide us, okay? So before we talk about that, I want to give you an example of a dream. Someone sent in a dream earlier in the week, and it's a dream that she's had years ago. She had this dream years ago before her child was born, but it's a dream that she's been carrying around with her. She doesn't know what it means, but she finally sent it to me so that I could help her interpret it. So let me walk you through the dream. In the dream, she is sleeping on her bed, okay? This is her first pregnancy in real life, and then in her dream, she's sleeping on her bed, and two people come into the room, and they try to physically harm her. They try to physically harm her, and during the time that they're physically harming her, she tries to get away from them. She gets up off the bed and then runs away. She runs away from them, but the two people keep on following her. It gets to a point where they get a knife out and they harm her, and they harm her child. So okay, as many of you know, whenever someone is pregnant, a lot of the time they will have more dreams during the time that they're pregnant. The reason for this is because when you're pregnant, you are connecting more with your body. You are connecting your mind, your body, your spirit, everything is connecting in one, so that way you can go through the process of having a child. So a lot of the time, women that are pregnant will have more dreams typically during these times. So okay, first of all, whenever she told me her dream, I do what I do with any other dream. I ask a lot of questions. The reason that I ask a lot of questions when people send me their dreams is because everyone really knows what their dream means. You know exactly what your dream means, but you just don't know how to interpret the different symbols. So I just need to walk you through it so that way you can tell me what it actually means to you on a profound level, okay? So I did the same thing with her. So I asked her, I said, you know what, during this time in your life, what was going on? What was happening? She told me that since it was her first pregnancy, she was living with her husband and with her mother-in-law, okay? So right then and there, I'm like, okay, so how was your relationship with your mother-in-law? She was like, well, she was a very difficult woman with her. They didn't get along very well, and she never really trusted the mother-in-law. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, that's kind of enough for us to start with this dream interpretation. I'm like, so in the dream, two people in particular are attacking you or trying to harm you. I'm like, during that time in your life, was there another person? Were there two people where you felt that you couldn't trust them? You felt you had to get away from them? You know, who are those two people? And she said that it was a very dark time in her life, and it was actually the mother-in-law and her sister-in-law. And she started telling me what they would really do to her in her waking life, how they harassed her, tried to hurt her, all of these really heavy things. And I said, I'm like, well, you know what? Your dream is clearly just a reflection of what was going on during your daily life. And I'm like, but the bigger question is, did you do anything about it? Did you leave the house? What happened? She said she didn't speak up. She didn't do anything. She just kept going about her business, trying to make the best of it. And I told her, I said, you know what? When you have a dream, any kind of dream, especially one that hits you that profoundly and that you consider a nightmare, and you understand what it means at one point, but if you don't do anything about it, guess what? That dream is going to keep coming back. You're going to have that dream again and again and again. Why? Because you haven't done anything about it. So this brings us to the bigger thing. When we are interpreting our dreams, we don't interpret them just so that we know what they mean. We interpret them so we know what they mean, and then we have this information, and it's like, what are we going to do with this information? Now that we know this, how are we going to apply this to our daily lives so that way we can have a better life, be more connected with ourselves, and live in a place that's more peaceful and more filled with harmony for ourselves, right? So that's what her and I were talking about. And she said that after going through this kind of dream interpretation conversation with me, that now she's going to be more open to receiving those messages in her dream, and not just knowing what it means, but also moving one step further and seeing what she does with that information, right? So this brings us to the interpretation of just nightmares in general. whenever you have a nightmare, remember, your dream, any kind of dream, is going to reflect what is going on in your daily life. It's going to reflect what is happening now, but also it can reflect what your subconscious thinks will happen in the future, okay? So whenever you wake up and you have this crazy dream and you're terrified, you're scared, whatever, the first thing you do is remember that it's just an alert. It's just an alert from your subconscious trying to bring attention to something that you have been ignoring, okay? So the first question is, what am I ignoring? What am I ignoring in my daily life that's bothering me so profoundly that it has showed up in my dream world, okay? And remember, when you're interpreting any dream, we're going to interpret them all very similarly, because whether it's a nightmare or a regular dream, we want to ask the same questions, and that is, what do those symbols mean to you? What did you see in that dream? What were you feeling in particular with each symbol? Because like we talked about in the last video, when you're dreaming about animals or just animals around you, a lot of the time that's going to reflect the people that you surround yourself with. And when you interpret the symbol per animal and the characteristics that you associate with each animal, those characteristics are going to also match the person in your real life that you're associating that with, okay? So it's just, excuse me, it's just a way to understand what those symbols mean to you, okay? So whenever you have a dream, it's okay to get scared during a nightmare and all of that, but when you wake up, just make sure you connect with yourself again and you say, you know what, I know this is just a message from my subconscious. Now that I have interpreted it, and now that I know what the symbols mean and who it stands for or what situation it stands for, what am I going to do with that information? Because remember, you can't just interpret your dreams and then not do anything about it, because then that dream will continue, and then you'll get to a point where you're like, you know what, I'm just a nervous person, I'm just an anxious person. But it isn't that. No one is an anxious or a nervous person at heart. At heart, we are just loving individuals. But if we never listen to our subconscious or what our subconscious is telling us, it's very easy for us as loving individuals to go into an area of more fear and anxiety, okay? And this actually brings us to our weekly message. And the weekly message is this: it's to operate our lives out of profound love. Okay, and we say that a lot. But this is so important, because think about it. Whenever you're talking to friends or talking to family, you start noticing a couple of things. You start noticing the people that operate their life through fear, okay? You can tell just by the conversations that you're having with them, the things that they say to you, the stuff that they talk about. That's what they're giving energy to, okay? So think about it. If you're giving energy to something that you are fearful of happening or that you don't want to have happen, the universe doesn't know good or bad. The universe just knows this is the energy you're focusing on. This is what's going to happen. This is the energy that we're going to help you build on, okay? So if you're surrounding yourself with people that are running their lives with fear and with insecurity and anxiety, guess what? They're running their lives like that, and that's what they're sharing with you. If you're okay with being around that, then that's fine. But what we need right now is we need to be surrounded with people like us that want to operate out of love, unity, and peace. Because if you have that within yourself and you can share that with others, then that's the best thing for you, okay? So think about this too. Whenever you're just on Facebook or watching TV, watching the news, what happens? A lot of the stuff that we're getting, all the information we're getting, is things that cause fear or things that cause anxiety. It's very rare that you actually find a good, uplifting story in the news. When you do, it's a very short clip, and then the rest of it is, this is what's going on in the world. This is all the stuff that's wrong with the world. And if you take that information and you accept it as your reality, then yes, everything that you see is going to be scary. Everything that you see is going to be uncertain. But think about it, you're going to be running your life like that. Is that the life that you want to live? Do you want to look outside yourself and only see that anxiety and that fear that you have allowed into your life? So, okay, this also brings us to one last thing. And I've gotten a couple messages about this actually, where people tell me that they are afraid to dream. They're afraid to dream because they don't know what kind of dream they're going to have, if they're going to have a nightmare, if they're going to see something that they don't want to see. And to that, it's really simple. It goes back to our weekly message, and that is to operate out of pure love. Because think about it, if you have a nightmare, nightmare or a dream of any kind, if you operate out of love and you interpret it with love, you know that it's there just to give you a message, nothing else. Even though it caused you fear and anxiety when you had it, if you operate out of love, you're just trying to understand the message that it is trying to give you. That is all that you're trying to do with it, and that is all that we need to do with it. So that way we know how to act from here on out by that interpretation, okay? But it brings us to the bigger question, the fact that people are sending those questions in where they're afraid to dream and afraid to connect with themselves. The bigger question is, why are we running our lives out of fear? Why are we constantly expecting the worst to happen? And like we talked about earlier, if we expect the worst to happen and we're giving all this energy to the stuff we don't want to have happen, guess what's going to end up happening? This thing right here, because this is what you're giving your energy to. So it's really funny because sometimes people say, well, Carolina, you're just too positive. How are you so positive all the time? And it's not that I'm positive, but it's just that why am I going to want to give energy to the stuff I don't want to have happen? Why don't I give the energy to the stuff that I do want to happen? Why don't I give all my loving energy to this so that this can grow? That makes a lot more sense. It makes a lot more sense to give energy to the things in the life that you want. If you give the energy out of just the pureness of your heart, if you give all of the loving energy to the things that you actually want to see in this world, that is what's going to grow. Okay, that is what's going to grow. So I challenge you this week to continue that, to continue operating out of love. And remember that whenever you're dreaming, whatever you see, whether you think that it's scary, whether it's a nightmare to you, whatever it is, if you interpreted it through love and just accepting that it's your subconscious giving you a message, you're not going to be afraid anymore. You are going to welcome those messages because you know that you are going to grow from that information. Okay? So guys, let's practice that this week. Let's continue interpreting our dreams out of love so that way that can grow more in our lives. All of the good things that we want to see in this world, let's give more energy to that because that is what's going to continue to grow. Just like I put in one of my other videos, I'm just putting like a little grain of sand. That's like my contribution, right? So you can share this message with other people and then they can put in their little grain of sand or whatever. And then we can have a whole beach of just loveliness, right? Okay, guys, so I send you love, unity, and peace this week. We will be in contact. Okay, bye.